All aboard! Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, football fans of all ages, I am Beast Mike. You have now arrived in my train of thought. It's time for the Week 3 Railway Recap. Say that 5 times fast. I doubt you could. It's barely easy for me to do it. But anyway, let's get to the Railway Recap for Week 3. A lot of things happened, and there were some bludgeonings. Let's talk about it. So this Dolphins-Bills game kind of worked out like I had kind of thought it would. It worked out where Miami would actually show their mettle and play relatively well. They generally did, at least on offense. The offense on the 3 touchdown drives was relatively flawless. They converted some 4th downs. They converted some big 3rd downs. They ran the ball physically with Ollie Gordon. They ran the ball efficiently with Devon Achane. Tua, Tyreek, and Waddle all played well. Unfortunately, the defensive part still lingered. We saw a lot of Josh Allen doing a lot of Josh Allen things. That touchdown pass early on, where it's heads you lose, tails you lose, there's not much you can really do. That's just vintage Josh Allen stuff. The Bills converted some 3rd and longs because, of course, they did. Some 2nd and longs because, of course, they did. And it came down to 2 plays. Otherwise, this is a very different game. And no, I don't mean the play that the refs let go at the half where Josh Allen did not correctly or properly kneel down. He was not down when he had control of the ball, let it be known. But that's not where we're here. We're here for the 2 plays that really cost Miami this game. And that's Zach Sealer roughing the kicker, and it was roughing, and the 2-0 where, yes, he was a little blinded by Walker. Yes, Walker did deflect it, but the decision itself is the problem here. And that's where it's a critical mistake that you just can't make at that time. And it's the 2nd straight week where Tua has made such a critical mistake. In the same vein in terms of an NO. It's a bad loss for Miami that could have been avoidable because Miami actually played relatively well enough to avoid the loss. For Buffalo, it's a good escape at home because though it was a 10-point win, it really didn't feel like it. Buffalo, take your win. And now we get to the portion of the video where the kids can properly say,
"Stop! He's already dead."
There's some good news and some bad news for what happened in Nashville for the Titans. The good news is they were the first team all season to cause the Colts to punt. The bad news is this did not help them actually win the game. Cam Ward's pick 6 to start the proceedings effectively was the end of the proceedings. And the next 50 or so minutes that followed were basically a procession of Jonathan Taylor dominating, Jonathan Taylor winning angry runs, and the Colts basically doing almost everything they possibly wanted to the Tennessee Titans without much fight or reprisal. Indy is now 3-0, and they look incredibly stable and efficient. Tennessee now 0-3, looking like a roster that needs a lot of help. But we knew this, and we figured this. We just didn't figure that the Colts would be 3-0 as we got to week 4 for Indianapolis. Good win for the Colts. Washington needed to bounce back in the worst way possible after what happened to them against Green Bay 10 days prior. They got their bounce back. They didn't get it with Jaden Daniels, but then again, considering how bad the Raiders played, they didn't really need it. Jeremy McNichols balled out, and instead of Austin Eckler, which, again, they didn't need Austin Eckler. Eckler's out for the year, unfortunately, but McNichols did his part, and he did really, really well for himself. The Commanders got a big kick return. They got big receiving plays. Marcus Mariota played a very clean, efficient game against one of his former teams. And they hung a 40-piece on the Raiders, and they needed this win in the worst way possible. The good news is Washington has shown that they can blow out and dominate the bad teams. Can they beat the good ones, even with Jaden Daniels? This is a question that they'll have to answer at some point in time. The bludgeonings continue. This one was in Charlotte, and okay, you would expect somebody to win 30-0 in this game between the Panthers and Falcons, but you wouldn't expect it to be the Falcons getting bludgeoned and getting beat 30-0. Now, in the jungle, sure, maybe if a Panther can actually catch a Falcon, okay, possibly, the whole cats eating birds thing, but this was completely unexpected. Bryce Young played relatively well. He didn't do anything truly dumb. He just played a decent game. Mike Penix, on the other hand, it was not good. The pick 6 was really bad and really telegraphed and effectively spelled the end of his day. I would not have expected Kirk Cousins to play in this game at all, or many games at all for the Falcons this year. And for him to play in this one and for Mike Penix to look that badly, it's a very rough day for a Falcon team that I thought had turned a corner last week against Minnesota. Instead, they ran into a brick wall. And Carolina, this is a pretty good way to get your first win against a rival and to shut them out like this. Very impressive. This was a bludgeoning I think we really could have seen coming had everything gone absolutely right for the Vikings. Why did I pick the Bengals in this game? My goodness, that was a terrible idea. Anyway, Isaiah Rodgers, that was one of the greatest individual defensive efforts of all time. I don't know how Pro Football Focus didn't give him a straight 100 for his efforts. He had a pick six. He had a fumble scoop score. He recovered a different fumble entirely and somehow didn't get 100 on Pro Football Focus. What's the matter with you people? Anyway, this was as easy and as straightforward of a dog walking as I've ever seen it. And I don't know, Cincinnati, what was that? Like, what do you even say to that? Never mind the fact Carson Wentz played, and Wentz actually didn't play a terrible game. It's just very, very back burner after the bludgeoning that the Vikings defense caused the entire game. It was absolutely horrid from Jake Browning. And if this is an indication of what's coming for Browning and the Bengals, their season really did end last week when Joe Burrow got the turf toe injury. For Minnesota, good. You can handle business against backup QBs. You'll be needed to handle business against starting ones later on. The kids don't have to shield their eyes because of the magnitude of the beating that happened in Duval. They might have to shield their eyes from the terrible offensive play at different times during this game, though. There were some innos in this game that were just ugly to watch. One from Trevor Lawrence, one from CJ Stroud. And to be honest, neither QB played all that well in this game. Lawrence only had 50% of his passes completed, and he didn't really get much rapport with Brian Thomas. Brenton Strange had an okay game, but like Brian Thomas had that one big catch, but other than that, it wasn't really much of anything. You could say that Lassiter and or Stingley won that battle. And then on the other side of it, aside from Nico Collins' play, not much really happened for Stroud. This was, simply put, a frustrating game for both parties, but at least in the Jaguars' case, they won said frustrating game. And then for Houston, looking as off and as rough as they've been, yes, all three losses are one-score losses, but they're 0-3, and the Colts are running away with this division more and more as we stand and as we speak. This game was also relatively ugly, and it begs the question, as a Dolphins fan, where were these Patriots last week? Where were these sluggish, sloppy, really ineffective, really inefficient Patriots last week? Ramondre Stevenson has fumbleitis, and the Patriots themselves turned the ball over 4 times, and Aaron Rodgers wasn't pretty with the offense. The offense itself wasn't pretty. DK Metcalf did score twice, which is fine, but it's all in all, it was not a fun game to watch, or a fun game to, I guess, play in maybe for the Steelers and Patriots. It was just, okay, let's get this win, rip this Band-Aid off, and move forward. And that's kind of what happened here. Ultimately, Pittsburgh wins the game, and I think both teams are better off if we never speak of it again. It was a rough game. I actually misspoke. New England turned it over 5 times, not 4. They lost 4 fumbles, which is pretty ugly. And Drake May threw an inno, so there's that. So I actually shortchanged the Steelers defense with extra turnover. So my bad, Pittsburgh. Your defense showed up when you needed to, and they showed out when you needed to when it came to actually clamping on New England and stopping everyone but Hunter Henry score touchdowns, because he did get 2 of those. Anyway, Pittsburgh is maybe, I guess, back on track. They're 2-1, and they have 2 road wins in the AFC East. I guess that counts for something. And now to the shocker of the day. And this game was relatively ugly for, well, the entirety of the game. Except for Myles Garrett pass rushing. That's pretty. That's always beautiful to watch. Anyway, aside from that, this was a relatively ugly game, and this was a Cleveland-style game where they're going to win it based off their defense, a mistake or 2, and then we move. And then we move forward. And that's effectively what happened here. The Browns, all they had to do was keep it close and not get completely overwhelmed by the Packer offense, which got clamped up because the Brown defense is like that. Green Bay's defense is also very good, and they were able to clamp Joe Flacco down relatively efficiently. Yes, they got an in with Xavier McKinney at the end of the first half, but they were otherwise relatively clamped up. until we got towards the very end. The Packers have a lead that seems insurmountable because it's a touchdown and the Browns are allergic to that, until we get the Jordan Love inno, and he picked a horrible time to throw one, and he picked a horrible time to then get trucked by Grant Delpit after said inno. 2 plays later, it's a tie game, and we're all looking at the score like, wait, what? Cleveland's not down 30? How did this happen? Okay, cool. Green Bay redeeming themselves. They're moving down the field. Tucker Kraft with another big play. All right, the Packers are moving. And then the kick gets blocked, which is becoming a theme. And then the Browns get into field goal range and bury a 55-yard kick. Again, the block kicks would become a theme. Cleveland steals a game they probably shouldn't have. Green Bay loses a game they really shouldn't have. And now their chances of getting the 1 seed may be in a little bit of trouble. Let's get to the Jets and Buccaneers in a game that looked like it was going to be a blowout and needed to be. As the Jets were really sluggish with Tyrod Taylor, their defense is still really, really suspect and bad, and things were looking like they should have. Well, except for the Mike Evans getting injured part. That's not great. He's going to miss some time. That's unfortunate because Mr. 1K is a little bit of trouble getting Mr. 1K and establishing that name again. Anyway, we got a pick 6 from Jamel Dean, and everyone thought at this point, okay, we can tune off this Jets game. This game's a wrap, and the Jets are going to be 0-3, Tampa 3-0, nice and easy. Until it wasn't. Until Tyrod Taylor put on a cape and said, you know what? We're going to make this happen. 2 tutties, 1 to Garrett Wilson, 1 to Alan Lazard. All of a sudden, the Jets have a shot. And then we get another blocked field goal, and this one was returned to the crib by Will McDonald. Great individual effort on his part to leap the line and then get the block, and then get the scoop, and then get the score. And then the Jets are now up by 1, and it's like, okay, all the Jets defense has to do is hold it down. But then you got Baker Mayfield, who has been as clutch as it gets in these first 3 weeks of the season now. And Baker calmly, with relative ease, had 100 or so seconds to get this done, and it was easily done by Baker Mayfield to slice and dice the Jet defense, and then a walk-off field goal for Tampa Bay to steal a game. So the Jets block a kick, take it back to the crib, and lose. Because of course the Jets do. That's their lot in life. Rams? How? How did this happen? Okay, let's talk about what went down here at the link. It went Stafford NO to start the game. All right, cool. The Eagles defense will tend to do that. Zach Bond made a great play. Eagles scored on what's now becoming an illegal play because, let's face it, there were some false starts that were completely missed. But we move. So did the Rams, because the Rams relatively dominated the rest of the second half and a lot of the game up until the end of the third quarter, as they went on a 26-0 run, and it was really, really easy for the Rams to do that. Eagles were getting booed at halftime. They did nothing after the short field tutty, and they clamped up Saquon Barkley to the Rams. Devontae Adams had a long touchdown in the first half, and it was looking relatively dominant. But then a lot of the second half happened with a mix of, yes, the Hurts touchdown to Goddard. So actually, I should say 26-7 run. The Hurts tutty to Goddard, and then A.J. Brown took over, and the Eagles defense started getting stops. Yes, the Rams losing their right guard was a huge loss, and the Eagles not having Lane Johnson was just as big of a loss because Jalen Hurts took some shots in this game. But as for the right guard situation for the Rams, Jordan Davis, remember that name, had a very dominant game. So did Jalen Carter, for that matter. The 4th down stop was gigantic for the Eagles, as Kyron Williams, who did score his obligatory tutty, got clamped up on a 4th down. The Rams' 3rd and 4th down conversion rate was not good for a lot of this game. And we get to the end of this game where Jalen Hurts has got to have it play a 4th down and goal and finds Devontae Smith on a nice little route to get the lead. Okay, cool. But Matt Stafford's really good at this. Stafford's good at the late game situations, the late game scores to win games and snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. And it looked like he was going to. Stafford and Nakua went to work. Now, yes, Nakua was held on a critical play that was uncalled, but Stafford and Nakua went to work, continuing with the damage they did for the entire second half, as Quinyon Mitchell had Devontae Adams clamped up. He was very impressive there. But it came down to the very end of the game. And like the last 2 drives did, both of them, came down to a block kick. If the Rams make one of those kicks, the first one especially, The Rams are up by 2 scores, and everything is over. The Eagles aren't making that up. The kick was blocked by Jordan Davis. And Jalen Carter with an assist. Not great. And then we get to the very end of the game, and now it's another long kick, and all the Rams have to do is make it. They get out of Philly with the W, and all is well. This was blocked by Jordan Davis. Davis with the scoop. Davis goes back to the crib. Eagles, instead of losing this game, they win this game by 6, and a lot of people lost a lot of money based off the Rams not covering the spread. And a lot of people won money for that same reason. It was once said that only the Lord saves more than Bernie Parent. Well, Bernie Parent was called to the goalie crease in the sky last Sunday. Rest in peace to Bernie. I've met him. He's a really good dude. I guess we could say when it came to last Sunday in Philadelphia, only the Lord and Bernie Parent saved more than Jordan Davis. There were 2 other beatings that took place in the late games on Sunday, so I'm going to need the kids to help me with this one.
Stop! He's already dead.
Thank you very much. And now let's go to Seattle and let's talk about what happened to the Saints. Nobody watched this game because we all watched the next and other beating that happened on the 425 slate. And Seattle, yikes. You guys were unmerciful. And you guys, without Zach Charbonnet, it didn't matter if he played or not. It was an absolute slaughterhouse. Sam Howell, could you have done this? And how could you have done this bad? And he took another beating, and the Saints looked very badly overmatched. Although they looked good while being badly overmatched. Those uniform combination is pretty sweet. They got absolutely rolled by Seattle. And the Seahawks didn't waste any time. It was 35-3 at one point, I think at half. So this game probably would have been switched over to the Cowboy game anyway. Or the Niner game. And this was an absolute slaughterhouse. And I think an indication, or at least a glimpse of what we thought the Saints could be for the rest of this season. Seattle got an easy win, and we keep it moving. Caleb Williams. We saw what I think a lot of people believed he could be. Now, maybe part of that's because the Cowboys' defense is atrocious, but this Caleb Williams performance was outstanding. I don't know why there were so many Bears wide open. It felt like every competent or every noticeable pass catcher Chicago had was wide open at least once during this game at some point in time. Luther Burden several times. Rome Odunze a couple times as they both scored tutties. DJ Moore on the 4th down. He scored a tutty because there was no respect at all from Chicago and trying to do anything against Matt Eberflus in the defense. This really was a Bears revenge game against Eberflus. My goodness, did Ben Johnson cook him. DeAndre Swift did his thing at different points. This was an absolute bloodbath by the Bears, and the fact that it was only 31-14, I'm disappointed in Chicago for basically calling the dogs off for the entire 4th quarter. I'm a little disappointed in the Bears for that. Dak threw a couple of in-outs, but they're really inconsequential. And he's the secondary piece of this whole puzzle here. The defense was downright awful. And losing CeeDee Lamb and losing him for at least 2 weeks and maybe even longer than that, maybe a month, maybe longer than that, it's an absolute brutal situation and sequence for the Cowboy team that Jerry Jones believed were to be contenders, but they look everything but, at least on defense. You're one bad defensive series from the Giants away from being 0-3. I think that's more accurate than the Cowboys being anywhere close to being a playoff team. The Niners and Cardinals were a good game and a relatively solid one that I don't think many people watched. There are some things that happened here, though. First, the Marvin Harrison drop. Ooh, that's ugly. For a guy I want to see take that next step forward, for him to drop that football, that's not something his father did. Not often, anyway. That was a pretty brutal drop, because that's a touchdown if he catches it. There is no Niner within sight of him. The nearest Niners are probably in LA watching the Giants-Dodgers game as the Giants are trying to make the playoffs. They probably won't because they continue to prove that they don't have enough bats to do such a thing. Arizona could have also been watching the Diamondbacks play the Phillies because that's a very important game for the Diamondbacks. So they try to make the playoffs. I'm not sure they're good enough to do it, but they are a pesky team. And there was no offense in this game, relatively speaking, to be quite honest. But there were also some very critical injuries in said game. James Conner out for the season with a knee injury is absolutely backbreaking for a Cardinals team that I think has high-end talent, but the depth, I just need to see it flourish on the offensive side of the ball. And then Nick Bosa, torn ACL, second time in 6 years, he gone for the year. Another injury to a Niner team that seems to have nothing but injuries every single year. Ricky Pearsall did have a good game, though, and for him to step up as Juwan Jennings had an injury, that was good to see. It was good to see that. It was also good to see it towards the very end of the game, some actual offense. This is after Cardinal safety. We got a touchdown for Trey McBride, which is good. We got a touchdown for Kyle Juszczyk, which is good. Then we also got another late game drive for Mac Jones. That's unexpected, but again, also not bad. The Cardinals gave up the yards late, and the Niners actually signed a kicker, Eddie Pinheiro, and Pinheiro banged in a game-winning kick so the Niners could survive and advance and get to 3-0, even with all the injuries. I don't know how long the Niners can last. I really don't. But the fact that they're 3-0 and two of those wins are with Mac Jones and not Brock Purdy is a good sign. For Arizona, no shame in this loss. You actually played relatively well, so maybe you're not a fraud. You're just not good enough to win this game, at least. Speaking of good games in California, Broncos, Chargers. This was a good game, and I feel like one that Denver really should have won, to be honest. The Broncos absolutely terrorized Justin Herbert. Their offensive line, the Chargers, were no match for the Broncos D-line, as they brought pain and suffering from all sides, mainly the blind side. Joe Alt was not having a good day. This was a really good performance by the Bronco defense, also forced the turnovers that we expected. Innos and a fumble on a kickoff after a touchdown, where the Broncos absolutely took over the third quarter. J.K. Dobbins had a really good drive. And yes, Sutton caught a tutty at this point, a point in the game. And the Broncos, in general, just looked the better part and looked like the better team for a good amount of this game here, until they absolutely needed to look like the better team. And what I mean by that is at the very end of this game, where the Broncos are up by 7 and they just have to hold the lead together. They could not. They could not get to Justin Herbert again, and Keenan Allen caught a touchdown pass. Great play by Herbert there. And they had a chance to get in the game-winning field goal range to seal it and take this game home and go 2-1. But unfortunately, Bo Nix, and he had some overthrows, missed what would have been a pretty much game-sealing one to Cortland Sutton. Instead, it turns into a punt, and then Justin Herbert, with relative ease, drives down the field and sets it up for Cameron Dicker. And Cameron Dicker knows what to do with it. He absolutely buries the game-winning kick, and Denver loses the game. They probably shouldn't have. Chargers are not chargering, which is impressive to see. They are a worthy 3-0 team and have emerged as, if not the best in the AFC, at least the second best. They have been that good. Denver's 1-2, and yes, the two are by field goals. The Broncos, I think, are still in good shape. They just have to finish out late game situations. This game was ugly. This Chiefs-Giants game was absolutely brutal, no matter how much Chris Collinsworth wants to praise and acknowledge Pat Mahomes as his tribal chief. This game was just brutal on both sides. Neither offense did much in the first half. Kansas City's offense did enough in the second half, but this was generally a brutal game outside of good runs by Cam Scatterbo and the wizardry that is Pat Mahomes. Not much else happened here. Russell Wilson had some bad overthrows, which led to Innos. He had some bad underthrows that probably should have led to Innos. The Giants' field goal kicking situation's a mess because Graham Gano got hurt before the game. And this was an abject disaster to watch on Sunday Night Football for the entire world to see because, of course, this is in New York. Well, New Jersey, technically speaking. This was ugly. Kansas City, take your win and run and don't look back. Don't go through the Hudson Tunnel again. Just go. Just leave. Just get out of here. And for the Giants, you're going to Jackson Dart finally. That's the good news. The bad news is his first game is going to be against the Chargers. The Chargers have a really good pass rush. I know Khalil Mack's got some injury issues, but the Chargers have a generally good pass rush. Good luck. And now to the game of the week. And it lived up to the hype for the most part. My Super Bowl preview was as advertised. Very entertaining and very exciting. Both teams traded bars to start the game, and we got the theme of the day which would be the running game. It wouldn't be the Ravens, though. It would be the Lions. Sonic and Knuckles absolutely terrorized the Ravens. 218 yards and 4 scores, one of which was an incredibly slick play where Amon-Ra St. Brown takes a handoff. Amon-Ra also scored in this game. He takes a handoff and then laterals it back to Jahmyr Gibbs, and Gibbs runs it to the outside, takes it to the crib. An absurdly ingenious play by the Detroit Lions, who still got a lot of tricks up their sleeve without Ben Johnson. Then again, it may be argued that it wasn't really Ben Johnson to begin with. This team is just naturally really good. They also seem to be good at getting to the quarterback, and they absolutely terrorized Lamar Jackson, which does not happen often. They got him 7 times, which is completely stunning, as opposed to none for Jared Goff, who played at a primetime stage on the road against a good team and played well. I don't know if Baltimore has a good defense because they've allowed 40 to the Bills and now 30 plus to the Lions, but Jared Goff played really well, got the ball to everyone he needed to. But this night was about Sonic and Knuckles and a little bit of Derrick Henry, who did score, but he also fumbled late in a gotta-have-it drive when they were down 7. And Detroit was able to relatively salt it away because Baltimore didn't do much until it was garbage time. Yes, Mark Andrews had a good day, but again, the Raven defense getting absolutely cooked by the Lions attack is very impressive. A large, loud statement win for the Detroit Lions. Very impressive on their parts. And now we're looking at a situation where the NFC North is the division of doom once again. As for Baltimore, you're now 1-2. And now you're in a game next week that's going to be pivotal and watched by millions of people. I will be talking about it tomorrow, where the loser is 1-3. And that's not on anyone's bingo card. Last week didn't go as planned at all. I went 8-8, and my overall record is 30-18. Coming up tomorrow, power rankings. Where does your team rank? Who is in what tier at what station? There are some teams that need to be in the zombie tier. There are some teams that need to move out of zombie tier. I'm going to have to do some rearranging, and we'll do so for tomorrow's power rankings. One thing that has remained constant and will remain as such: New Orleans, you will be the first stop of my next train of thought.